Hello there. My name's Julie Poole. I'm a hypnotherapist and I want to talk to you today about helping you to understand childhood sexual abuse and the impact on the survivor and on their families. So whether you are the survivor or whether you're the family of a survivor, I'm hoping that this video will help you. You'll find in the description box below there is a link to my website, and this particular video I've written a fact sheet, an information sheet for you to be able to download free and keep for yourself, so don't feel that you need to take notes. Alright, so I'm going to be giving you some facts and figures because one of the worst things I think for all survivors is this feeling of separation and aloneness, the feeling that they're different, and the feeling of how did this happen. So some of these facts and figures are a little bit scary, but we need to understand them because it will help you to realize that you're not alone. Now, I've got some figures in front of me that I'm going to be looking at, so I'm going to be looking away from the camera a little bit, so please bear with me. All right. So let's start with the definition of childhood sexual abuse, which I'll call CSA for short, okay? So the definition is broader than most people think. It includes any sexual act between an adult and a minor or between two minors when one exerts power over the other. This may include forcing, coercing or persuading a child to engage in any type of sexual act, as well as non-contact acts such as exhibitionism, exposure to pornography, voyeurism and communication in a sexual manner by phone or internet. This is all classed as CSA. So let's have a look at some of the details, and I know this is hard reading, but please bear with me. Here are some facts and figures that you need to know. Across the world, 20% of children have been sexually abused. In the United States, 16% of men and 26% of women have been sexually abused in childhood. That's 1 in 4 or 5. That's huge. According to the NSPCC in Britain, 5% of children in the UK have been sexually abused, but most studies put it at much higher, at around 10%. And please bear in mind, these are only the figures that have been reported. The majority of people do not report their abuse. I've been working with survivors for about 7 years now, and I have never ever had any survivor tell the police, and most have not told their family. So these figures of all the people I've worked with wouldn't show up on the figures. So when we're looking at these figures, this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's important to know that. So study shows that abuse involving either physical penetration and abuse involving a father or a stepfather has greater long-term harm. Now, this doesn't in any way diminish abuse without penetration or from a non-parental family member, but the clinical studies demonstrate that the long-term effects have a more destructive force, often leading on to severe destruction such as substance abuse, eating disorders, suicide and self-harm. Survivors of CSA have a feeling of isolation and stigma, as well as dreadfully poor self-esteem. Oftentimes this leads to suicidal behaviours when they are reactivated and triggered by similar situations in adulthood. Survivors feel dirty, disgusting, not worthy, full of self-blame, lonely, unloved and uncared for, desperate for love and affection, validation and worth. There is an incredibly powerful need to be accepted, loved, cared for and to feel safe. This need will often drive the person into destructive relationships and into a destructive life. Survivors are far more likely to develop anxiety disorders, particularly post-traumatic stress disorder, and even experience psychotic symptoms. Adults over 25 who have experienced CSA are twice as likely to attempt suicide as those that haven't. That's a lot. But if we look at the figures for 13 to 25-year-olds, it's not twice as many, it's 10 times as many. So 13 to 25 is the huge risk time of suicide, where basically the trauma and disgust that they feel becomes so overwhelming they don't want to be here anymore. So if this is you, understand that the fact that you're still here shows how very, very strong you are. And for the families of survivors, please understand what your loved one is living with every day and give them the support and the love that they need. Let's move on to some other figures. Roughly a third of all sexually abused children have attempted suicide, and 43% have thought about it. That's nearly half. 70% of all psychiatric emergency room patients report a history of CSA. So these are the people who have got so desperate they check themselves into a psych unit or been sectioned. So let's talk about the head, and in particular the brain. CSA has programmed the brain to be on constant danger alert. There is a part of your brain called the amygdala and the hippocampus. These are the emotional centres of the brain, and they've been proven and shown within studies when somebody has been sexually abused to be far more active than somebody who hasn't been abused, which means that basically, what does that mean? It means that your danger radar is constantly on high alert. And because it's on such high alert all of the time, you're constantly anxious. You never feel safe. And even when it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years after the abuse, you still feel unsafe. This can be changed, but it takes work. Your brain has become wired to fear life and to make bad decisions. So let's talk about education, being thick, feeling thick, dropping out. Academic problems in childhood are a common symptom of sexual abuse. Sexually abused children perform lower on psychometric tests, measuring cognitive ability. They perform lower on academic achievements and on memory assessments. Studies indicate that sexual abuse exposure amongst children and adolescents is linked with high school absentee rates, special education services, and academic difficulties. In fact, a history of CSA significantly increases the chance of dropping out of school altogether. So no matter what your education or what your academic achievements, you are not thick, you are not stupid, and you are not a failure. Do not write yourself off. The CSA you experience put the spokes in your education, but it doesn't mean you're thick, and neither does it mean that it's forever. Let's talk about alcohol and drugs. Wonderful anaesthetics, aren't they? Numb that pain right down, can't feel a thing? Excellent. Well, not really. It's just delaying the inevitable, plus it's adding something else destructive that you have to deal with later. A number of studies have found that adolescents with a history of CSA demonstrate a 3- to 4-fold increase in the rates of substance abuse. So that's something else to recover that from then, plus the CSA that led you there in the first place. What about food? That's a substance too. Obesity and eating disorders are far more common in women who have a history of CSA. Figures show that 16 to 24-year-old women with CSA are four times more likely to be diagnosed with an eating disorder, and middle-aged women who were sexually abused are twice as likely to be obese. So if you've got problems with food or drug or alcohol, I want you to realise that this is not your fault. It's part of your coping mechanisms to deal with that trauma. But there are better coping mechanisms, I promise you. So I'm giving you all of this figures, horrible though they are, because survivors that I've worked with feel that they've done something wrong. They're the odd one. It must have been their fault because these sorts of things just don't happen. These figures I'm giving you, as much as they are hard to hear, will help you to realise that you are not alone and it was not your fault. This is prevalent across the world, and you were targeted and it wasn't your fault. This understanding helps to start the healing process, and it helps to help the family too. The more you know, the easier it is to heal and release them. When you've finished this video, there's a full fact sheet article on this, which is free for you to access and download. You just need to go to my website. It's on the shop page, but it's on there as 0. It's just free. You'll need to put in your email address, because that's how it's received to you, downloaded to your inbox, and you can do what you want with it then, print it off or just keep it, share it if you want other people to understand a little bit more. So the more you know, the easier it is to heal and release. And it's worth trying to Google some abuse organisations, find out a little bit more from the official experts like psychologists, psychiatrists, sexual abuse counsellors, and charity organisations. Find out as much as you can, because the knowledge creates the understanding, and the understanding starts the healing process. Now, I know this has been very depressing, listening to all these facts and figures, and I agree. But if you have experienced depression, had suicide attempts, had mental health problems, drug or alcohol problems, been arrested, convicted, been in prison, been promiscuous, been a sex worker, have no education, feel thick, feel good enough, feel worthy, you are not alone. And now that you've heard all of this, you can begin to see that your behaviour and patterns and reactions are actually a very normal response, not an abnormal one. And this is then leading into the journey into bringing those broken bits of you back together. A journey to reprogram your wiring, your beliefs and your drives, to release the disgust, the shame and the pain. A journey to feel clean enough, good enough, worthy enough, lovable and deserving. A journey into peace, where you can move past the past. The journey begins with you wanting to move past the past and to heal through understanding, awareness, counselling and therapy. Now, I've written a book on this subject. It's called Moving Past the Past. The link to it will be below on the description, and this book is filled with other people's stories, facts and figures, and exercises for you to be able to begin to work through releasing some of this stuff. And if you would like to work with me one-to-one as a client, again, the link is below to my website, where you'll see the contact me form. Don't worry about where you are in the world. Nearly all of my clients are on Skype or FaceTime, and some of them are on the telephone. I've got clients all over the world, so it doesn't matter where you are. If you feel you want to work with me and I can help you, please get in touch. I hope this has been helpful for you, and I wish you all the love and luck in the world. Take care. Bye bye.